Welcome to the Anthro to UX podcast, where you will learn how to break into UX with an anthropology degree. Through conversations with leading anthropologists working in user experience, you will learn firsthand how others made the transition, what they learned along the way, and what they would do differently. We will be discussing what it means to do UX research from a practical perspective and what you need to do to prepare a resume and portfolio. I'm your host, Matt Artz, a business anthropologist specializing in design anthropology and working at the intersection of product management, user experience, and business strategy. Let's get started. All right, hi everybody, welcome back. This is Matt Artz of Anthro to UX. I'm here today with Wang. Bo is a user experience researcher at Best Buy, 8 months in. And so today, given like the freshness of the role, if you will, we'll be talking a little bit more about how, the sort of immediate process of coming into that role, what that was like coming out of academia, talk a little bit maybe about the challenges, the opportunities, the lessons learned, etc. And to give a little background on Bo, so postdoc from University of Lausanne in Switzerland, Ph.D. from University of Wisconsin-Madison, MA in anthropology as well from Peking University in China, and a BA in sociology from Nanjing University in China. So we'll kind of, of course, talk a little bit about that as well. And so, Bo, to start it off, you maybe want to tell us all a little bit about your background, how you came to anthropology, and specifically in this case, since you started in sociology, what maybe made you make the switch?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Matt. First of all, thank you, Matt, to include me and invite me to this discussion. I'm really happy to share my recent experience transitioning from anthropology to the UX world. So for me, I was trained as a sociology student, and then I took interest in anthropology because I'm really attracted by the idea that to explore human experiences with a very open-minded approach. So I really love that. So the ability to use storytelling and to show the depth of meanings by conversations, by understanding why people do what they do. So this really got me into anthropology. So I just went on and then even finished my Ph.D. Doing research, trying to figure out why Tibetan villagers and think of solid waste management different from other people. So yeah, it has been very rewarding experiences. But it's only recently, like after postdoc, so thinking about where to live, in the long term. So I think it's a question a lot of people are dealing with. Not to trivialize, this is a real concern for many people, especially in academia and current climate. So I think it's a good choice for me. I really am happy with the career transition. Still in the middle of it, you could say, but so far so good, I would say.
Great. Yeah, thanks for sharing. And so let's just go back a bit though. So you said you were in Tibet for your PhD? Did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah. And, between that and your postdoc, it didn't really look like you were too, very much on the UX path. So tell me a little bit about, as I've asked some other people in the past, where in that academic journey did you really become aware of UX and how did that even happen for you?
Yeah, I think it's really sort of a journey of self-discovery because, like you said, on the surface, it doesn't look fairly remotely connected. However, underneath, I see a lot of connections. Now, recalling my initial entrance to the fieldwork in the Tibetan village, I actually started with a design firm. So as I was entering the village, I'm trying to learn about the waste management, and I got the opportunity to be working together with this local culture experts. And then he was consulting for this environmental art design firm. So I just tagged along. I didn't know like the point of having this, but I appreciate like all the anthropology students. We appreciate any opportunity that is open to us, help us to establish rapport with the locals. So just tagged along. And then I realized they were doing signage design, like signage that introduces this village, the stories, and then to educate people about waste management. Mm-hmm. So I thought, oh, this is a good opportunity to learn. And then I worked with a team. They had a director, they had writers, they had people with GPS, with more like hardcore stuff, and then have people who interview and write stories, sketches. So I think just naturally, we hang out together. I learn how they work, and they also curious about why are you here? Like, what you seems like you are also collecting stories. What's different from you and our content, writer? So I think at that moment I didn't understand, to be honest, but as we were working very closely, but then when we reached the village, actually, I was the only one who talked to the villagers and asking about their stories. And I realized, the villagers were not really enthusiastic about this project as I would have imagined. So I realized like this is the kind of marginal perspective. As an anthropologist, I'm able to connect right away. So I just went to talk to them. So eventually, like my experience with the villagers had a feedback to the company, and they actually took some of villagers' perspective, put that at the center of their design. So I think it happened to me like so naturally. I feel like as anthropologists are just curious, and we just keep an open mind to what people say and think and do. So I think this is such a natural transition for me to continue to do the same thing, just in a new setting that is the corporate setting.
Mm-hmm. So out of curiosity, you said the content writer wasn't really speaking, with the local Tibetans. So who were they talking to, or how were they capturing their stories?
So the content writer at that moment, she was primarily focusing on interviewing this culture expert. So which was my first point of contact as well, to be honest. I think because the story the culture expert was able to offer sounds so fascinating and so holistic and very authoritative, and then it sounds like it's just this story. But if you think about it, not everyone coming to a village for tourism are interested in learning the similar story, over and over again. So they want to be more like open to what's special about this place. So I think the expert who's trained in folklore and was able to tell a story that may not have a local roots. So I think that's why it may be less of interesting to tourists, and then it's harder to pass on the message to tourists. I think that's the decision of talking to villagers was really like because I had this observation that the villagers were not part of the story at all. So then they didn't know like what this work was about, even though since their life is deeply impacted, and then they are the ones who are interacting with tourists.
And so you said that they also weren't that interested in the project as a whole. And so did you help them maybe understand it from one perspective, and also help the design team understand it from another? Did you act as some kind of bridge, in an effective way? Or I know you said that some of the stories of the villagers were incorporated into the design team after you were involved, but do you think you helped sort of bridge the gap and make them come to a better understanding of each other's sort of interests?
Oh yeah, of course. So at this time, I think the company was actually based in Kunming, the capital city of the province, Yunnan province. So they were coming down to do a field research, kind of to collect more evidence and materials to actually compete on a bid that is offered by the government. So it's quite a big one. And this company was previous to this, they were focusing on the urban environmental design. So this is the new kind of area of business they're working on the rural area. So I think my ability to kind of build the two perspectives and put them together really had a strong case because, they add a lot of local sensitivities to their business proposal and to their design as well. So this really went over, helped them to win this bid. And then it was kind of eventually helped the company to build this successful case and capacity to do similar eco-village signage design in other area of the province, even beyond. So I think it was kind of a very instrumental, like the role I played, and to help in part to help the company to build this new capacity.
And now that's not, all that different than the work we have to do in UX, in that we have various stakeholders, often with very different perspectives, speaking oftentimes very different languages, and we have to, help sort of mediate that. And so, did you learn any particular lessons in that you would like to share, and maybe that you've brought forward into your UX work today?
Yes, definitely. I think the reason, I just started doing the work that I do, I think it's really to be empathetic to people I talk to, and then trying to understand where they come from and why they think something is what they need. So this is very important because oftentimes, and our partner stakeholders may have assumptions, with ideas like, I have this product or service and it must be desired by people. So without, there's many steps in between. So desired by whom and for what reasons? Because people can use your product out of absolute necessity instead of out of passion and love. So, and when, if it's the first case, when they have a new alternative, a better alternative, they will just jump off and then go for the other one. So I think there's a lot of space in between. So I think the ability to be empathetic, to hear, other perspectives, it's very crucial. I guess for a lot of, it's really not new skill for a lot of anthropology and social science Ph.D. students. So it is basically what we've been learning, and we are trying to do ethnography and trying to understand others and on their own terms. I think this is really valuable and a very effective communication as well to persuade our stakeholders to take our side and then to be, along with us in the exploration.
And so I agree with you that that's something that we're trained in and we learn, but there are also many things that we don't necessarily learn that we then have to do when we're out in not only the field, but also, in our careers later. And I'd be curious, when you were working side by side with the design team, what struck you as interesting? Not everybody gets to work side by side with a design team necessarily, like during their field work. And so it's an interesting opportunity that I can see why it led you to UX, but it also had to be relatively eye-opening at that time because the disciplines are quite different. Even though there's overlap, they're quite different. And there's a lot of skills from design that, we can benefit from. And so anything particularly strike you at that time that you really wanted to incorporate into your own practice?
Yeah, definitely. I think it was totally eye-opening and learning opportunity for me as well. So as a starting anthropologist in training, I was also anxious trying to gather data and trying to understand the whole idea. So I'm just focusing on a lot of observation. So I'm just amazed by the team from the design firm the ability to create things from scratch. And then I was amazed like by the person who just collecting GPS, and whenever they found a good location for the signage to be erected later, so they would just record the GPS coordinations and data. So and then there's the artist, who sketch a possible design, to be placed on this area. So to be able to mock up a design that later on will be used in their proposal. And then the content writer, so she was like taking notes, a lot of, and then there's also photographer who is taking like professional photographer and then photograph and then trying to construct visuals, to kind of make this project from nothing to real. So, and then there's also the director who keeps talking with the culture expert, with the local guide. So trying to collect as much information as they can. So for me, like I was observing basically initially, I didn't do much. I was just like trying to understand what's going on. So like learning how they do, and every day they each have their own goals, and then they just work along with each other. They talk during breaks, but then they work on their own role, specific role, and then at the night they will just reflect what they have done like so far. They go through what they created or collected. So I think it was really eye-opening, like how quickly they can put things together. And it was also a thing that anthropology students think, our fieldwork takes a year, and then theirs is like 3 days, but they have a lot of material to work with. So that's the idea of timeline, or temporality was really shocking to me.
Mm-hmm. And so, how have you, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but how have you done kind of getting up to speed at moving at that pace now that you're working at Best Buy in UX?
Yeah, thanks for that question. That's something that it just keeps haunting me, like since I started. At first, I was actually tasked to do a large cross-team project. So, having anthropology academic training in mind, so I just think, this project might have, maybe several months time in plan. So I ended up proposing a very large framework. So, and then a lot of teams just jump on this opportunity. They said, we have more asks, and then can you take that on as well? So I feel like that also has to do with academia. Usually, you do not have a lot of the chance to say no to, your stakeholder, which might be your advisor or committee members. So you just take in. So the result would be a bit kind of chaotic, because I ended up with a huge framework, and then presented to leadership. They were interested, but it's really hard to execute this research. It's hard to operate. I would imagine that require an entire team to carry on with this project instead of just myself. So I think that helped me to kind of adjust my own expectation for myself. So I try to think ahead of time, before I started a project in the UX world and at the company, I would just think, what is the timeline here? And, how long do they need the project to be delivered? So I think this is a learning journey, I would say. So there's definitely a learning curve. So I will, gradually I will catch on, and then be able to, design research project that's appropriate in length and also in scale. So which helps me a lot.
Yeah, that's definitely a big one that we all need to learn. Especially those who haven't maybe worked previous to in industry previous to coming out of an academic degree. But there are, of course, other things as well. And so I'd be curious, like, even individual work versus group work is something that's a little bit different. I mean, I think you can make an argument that in the field, everybody's doing a bit of group work, even if it's not framed that way. But it is still group work teamwork in an organization is still a little different. So besides, the temporality and maybe a little bit of the sort of individual versus group dynamic, what were the other big shockers for you that you recently learned, given how all fresh this all is for you?
I think, like, continue to the point that I raised earlier in answering your question, which is in academia, like, there are not many chances we get to say no, but in industry, like, it's actually a lot, like, because it's a kind of a setting that where you collaborate with so many others, and then especially in a lot of the UX world, professional world, like, researchers are the rare resources. So you have to make a priority, like, who do I say yes and who do I say no? And then I think also you make this decision not just out of personal preference. You have to think about, this decision has to be informed by the business priority and by the organization or at least by your team, research team's priority. So, and you're able to kind of combine several asks into one, or being able to prioritize the one that would have the most impact. So sometimes you do have pushback from people. They all think their work or their project is the most important. Mm-hmm. And then each team would think their function is the most important in the company. So in that case, I think a good way to think about this, the way of work is that, often we see, like, as researchers turning into UX, and then you have to think about all your stakeholders and what they need and what they want. But also I would like to add, you as researcher, you are also a stakeholder to their work, because you are the stakeholder to their product work, to their design work. They have to consider your willingness to work or not. So I think this is a good way to leverage, like, my research time is also very valuable, and how I can help to fit in to your workflow and without, compromising on my end as well. So there are times, like, I had to put down my foot and then to say, like, hey, stop just asking me always at the last minute to run a research for you. And if we are going to work together, we are collaborators, we are equal. So I am equally stakeholder to you as your stakeholder to me. So here's the process if you want to collaborate. And then here's how I do work. And then tell me how I can help you. And tell me how your work fits in my roadmap. Mm-hmm. I can tell you, like, how I can contribute to your roadmap as well. So I think this is not talked a lot in the UX in the academia to UX. I think we are just in a very initial stage. We tend to be compromising a lot, like the story I told earlier. So I was taking on new work without thinking about the timeline. So I think this is also crucial, because sometimes you have to say no. You have to make sure your collaborator not taking advantage of your time, and thinking about research is so, you can research on everything, and all the research always too late, should be done yesterday. So, but the reality is that researchers are people too. So we have bandwidth, we have our own plans. So I think that's a shock to me. Like, I'm still learning to say no and to push back and to ask people, like, what is exactly you want to learn? When do you want it? And can this wait? Or things like this. Mm-hmm. I think it helps them to learn also what's the best way they can benefit from research. Yeah.
Yeah, saying no is it's a difficult thing to learn, and being able to focus in on only a few things is something that not all companies do well. Even in the product world, right? There's a tendency to just want to keep adding features instead of really focus, like Apple has, say. And so, aside from those items that we just talked about, when you were working side by side with the design firm, did you also learn anything about business that stuck out to you, like other business skills, not design skills, not research skills, but just other aspects of actually doing business that is very different in industry than it is in, say, academia?
Yeah, I think business is different from academia. I'm still learning. I think I'm still a beginner in this world. Um, there's always uneasy relationship between business and the product design, I would say. And of course, business wanted outcome, wanted, moving the needle. So it's usually meaning that to generate financial gains or profits. However, the product is different. I think their goal is to have more features and, if people like them and people use it more. And then sometimes, the two has frictions and sometimes they work together. And then as researchers, I'm also learning about this culture, like how they awkwardly, trying to negotiate with each other, and how at times how one tried over the other, and in other times it's the opposite. So I think to me, I didn't get a lot of chance to do official business training. I did actively seek opportunities outside academic job market. They started when I was in my postdoc position in Lausanne, in Switzerland. So they have a good project that helps PhDs and postdocs to pursue non-academic career. So we had this coach, and then she has a PhD in anthropology from Chicago, and then she's from England, but then she lived in Switzerland for long. So we really hit it off, and then she was doing workshops, training us to turn our CVs to resumes, and then to develop professional websites, and then to seek opportunities to have this kind of short trainings to build up our credibility in the professional world. I think that's my exposure to this. And I was able also to connect with my peers. There are people from Italy, France, from all over the world in the classroom, and they are not just social science, they are natural science, and there are also engineers in the room, biologists. They were all thinking about pursuing career, usually in companies or governments. So I think this really helped me open up my mind and then just pursue other possibilities. I think the result was great. So I'm still learning the business skills and a job. So I was able to, because the company I work at is really, the part of it was really, I would say, agile. So I was able to work alongside with business side, the people from the director level, even higher. So we are making decisions together. So I was able to see how they think and how I would think and how my product partners would think, and why people just have different views and how they compromise, how they negotiate. So I think this helps me, like, even though I support product primarily, but oftentimes the insights from my research findings are taken directly by the business team. So they're used right away in messaging, in communication, in other strategies. So which was, you would say, like, it's not defined in my role, but I think, the research can have as much impact as you can make it be. So I think that's why yeah, I'm still learning. I think it should be like, more impactful than just in a specific product area. So I think a lot of companies are doing pathfinding research. I think, to be honest, to me, I think it just sounds like decision making, but more reliant on research. It called pathfinding, basically projecting what the future would look like for the business, for the company, for the technology, for solutions as well. So I think researchers deserve to be the decision-making table, and as a person who's been in that table, who is there and can observe how I can contribute to the conversation, it's really helpful. Like for me, I wanted to do more. I want to make evidence-based research to have more impact in the organization.
Sure. So I definitely want to come back to that and maybe connect that to to strategy and whatnot. But just to go back real quick to the training that you had in Switzerland. So you mentioned, of course, work on the CV, convert that, kind of like get that in like more resume format, and that's sort of low hanging fruit. You also mentioned like a personal website, which maybe is a little bit more difficult than just the resume, since not everybody has tech training, but very doable these days and something that probably everybody should consider. But what really stuck out at me in what you said there was you said something about how to increase credibility. And of course, increasing credibility for practitioners in industry is very different than it might be, in academia. In academia, in many ways, it is about publishing. But, lots of anthropologists and UX are going to work for people who really don't care about that. They might not have been academics themselves one day, in any kind of formal sense. And so that might not even be of importance to them, and something they, in many cases, you're not even going to include on a resume. So for everybody who's listening, who's in a similar position, what were you being trained in, in how to go about increasing your credibility at that stage of your career?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Matt. I think really, in this training in Switzerland, really what struck me was that I had to shift my, thinking. Previously, I was thinking like, I'm doing a project that's so powerful and so meaningful, I would change a lot of things. So my priority was to describe how important the project was. So I usually do not get to talk to myself, like maybe until the third paragraph or something like that, to just put it in that way. However, in trying to find industry jobs, I think it's the opposite. It's the other way around. So you put yourself first. So you have to establish like you are a credible researcher. You have done work, and then these are the works you've done, and then these are the change you brought about. So like I started to look back my research. Like I've been doing the same thing. It's just a different way of framing. So instead of like telling people I started my field work with, working alongside with a design firm, in academic setting, I would say like, okay, my project is about the culture between environment and, the local villages or something like that. So it's really broad. So like which kind of made me like very small, and kind of the project has to go on, and with or without me. So I think the other way around, you're saying that I have initiative, I want to do things and then make changes. So I think this is a really shock to many students who are finishing up, or who are just in the middle of PhD, and they're thinking about it, but then it's really hard to shift around, because in the cycle of academic training, so you are trained not to play up your own role. You're trained to just think about the broader field and think about what's the most important issue right now. And then you get to what you do in a very minimum way. So thinking about my training, like even in the proposal stage, when I was asked, how do you do your research? I think the most I can give is like I will start doing field work. I haven't had many kind of narratives about how I actually do things. So, but of course we learn as we start. So like, I think that's actually a good thing. But I think to make it very effective, that you have value and then how you can show the value to the professional world. I think this change of framing really helped me.
Great. Yeah, thanks for sharing. It's definitely an interesting point. And you're fortunate that you had that opportunity to take that course or that training, it sounds like. So, you do this, you do your work in Tibet, you work side by side with a design firm. You kind of get a little dialed into how anthropology could connect to that type of work. You're in Switzerland, you end up with this other training that kind of helps you reframe. And so, you're sort of now moving forward to industry, but there's still that question of when exactly do you learn that something called UX exists? Of course, everybody kind of stumbles across that in a different way. It's typically not in academic programs. Do you recall how you actually got dialed into the exact sort of, industry that you're in?
Yeah, of course. I think for me, it really helped that I was able to have a solid circle of friends, of people who made the transition ahead of me, and then they come from anthropology, sociology, psychology backgrounds, and political science, and then they made the jump, and then a lot of them knew them from grad school and even earlier, and others I knew from after I signed on LinkedIn, and then including you, like I listened to your talk about the TED talk about 23andMe. So I think a lot of these successful stories are inspiring to me, and getting connected to people and then have this 30 minutes chat, and it really gives me a window to look into what the UX professional life was like. And also I was just reading nonstop about books, about websites, and then there's tons of materials out there, and also there's training you can take, career coach or people who can give you specific guidance based on your scenario. So I think these are all very helpful, especially for people with academic training. I'm not super worried about the research profile, as long as you know how to reframe it, how to make it accessible, to make sure people understand. So you are a very mature researcher, you understand the ins and outs of research. The other part I'm more worried about was how you break into this kind of lot of terminology, a lot of, you could say, jargon in UX research. So this takes some time. But after that, it's basically practice on your skills to present, to collaborate. I think these skills we already have somewhere buried under our skin. We just have to bring it out through practice. A lot of times, it's kind of weird to say, but I just practice by attending a lot of interviews. So I think that really helped. And also it's a confidence building process, from initially hearing from nobody to gradually I was able to always pass first round and then second round and then move further along, and then I got offers. So I think these are really helpful. And also you find real world experience. I think this is a tricky notion because for our researchers, we already have a lot of real world experience. And what do you mean that we don't have real world experience? I'm saying that the real world experience is that sometimes you need to be exposed to what UX professionals are doing. So I, kind of helped out my friends within their, capabilities. And also I signed up for NGOs that helped to distribute COVID vaccine information to county level, communities. So these are really cool, like a lot of volunteers, and then we work together to build websites, to build phone books, because a lot of areas in America, the county government, they still use computer like in 1980s, or it's very old. So like to be able to work on these projects, you can see your work would bring change right immediately, because you help to reach out to these people who otherwise cannot be reached, even though you have a very good COVID vaccine policy, right? How they can be delivered to the community, to the people. So I think this really helped me to understand, what's the point of doing UX research. I think, all these kind of contribute together. I'm sure everyone has their own unique path, and you will find the ways that works best for you. But similarly, I think these are some of the things that had worked for me. So I hope it could be helpful for you as well. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. No, I, certainly self-study, networking, volunteering, online courses. Those are frequently the things that come up, and career coaches, and obviously all of those help. Networking particularly can be a very big benefit. And you were pretty active on LinkedIn. And so did you find anything, specifically that helped you, whether it was on LinkedIn or not? But, you seem to be doing pretty good with networking. So any lessons learned there?
Yeah, definitely. I think behave the way that you would in the real life. So you would totally get people's attention, and people would respect you, and as long as you respect them. So I usually, for example, in LinkedIn, I'm not against just send people requests to connect. It's very forceful, but also it's kind of sometimes lack of context. Like people don't know why you're sending this request. In that case, sometimes if it's someone I'm interested in their work, I could just use follow instead of connect. But if I'm particularly interested, I can find a reason, particularly like, I'm interested in this company, or we are from the similar background. So I would just add a note describing that, and then send a connect, because I would think that connect and talk would benefit. I think these are some general tips. But overall, I think also be respectful of people's time. Like as most people on LinkedIn may be already on a professional time schedule, and then they you can ask to book 30 minutes or things like that. And even I'm surprised, like a lot of people are willing to just help even without knowing a lot about me. So that's why I'm decide to give back the same way I help others when they reach out to me. It's more often, it's kind of the norm in the professional world, but this is what I learned. From academia, it sounds like it's more like stardom. It's like you're chasing the big stars. You're just like, you wouldn't just network with anyone. But in professional world, it's totally more accepted. It's the norm. And I think what's surprising is that a lot of people actually offer me to do the mock interview, like to do like real time. Like even I haven't met this person or talked to this person at all, but then they were saying like, I would just call you like at 2:30, and then you pick up the phone call. They would just say like, "Oh, hey, Bo, and we are this company. We're interested in you," and they would just ask questions. It was the first time, this had happened. But it was really helpful. It was so real and really helped when the actual interview happened because it's as if I've done that before already. So, and I talked about it, what worked, what didn't. So I think this really helped me to see the value. And I started to do the same to people who asked me. And then they were really appreciated that this was offered to them. And I was happy to report back that several people I helped, and then they got jobs,
That's great.
As UX researchers full time. So it was really rewarding to me. And I really appreciate this kind of networking culture and then helping each other out.
Yeah, it's a friendly industry for sure. And so thanks for sharing all that. Now, in terms of current job, so again, UX researcher at Best Buy, been there 8 months, so still fresh, but obviously, as you've indicated a few times today, you have some interest about what anthropologists can contribute in business, not just from a research perspective, but going a little bit beyond that. You earlier said not just for product, but also to business teams. So what do you see, and I appreciate that this might vary from organization to organization, but what do you think we can contribute that we're not maybe doing enough of today, whether that's to certain teams or, by doing something specifically ourselves? Where do you see the opportunities be?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think, so in the ideal world, so all the decision making should involve levels of research, even when it's impossible, and trying to think about with evidence, with nuances. Most of the time, people just ignore and skip this step. So you end up hurting yourself because you didn't do it. For example, if you're designing a product and then you've already designed without any research on what the users might want or need, you just follow. And then you have this design already and out there living in the world, and you may receive a lot of feedback, some positive, some negative, you don't know. And it's much messier in this way because then you have to change your product, right? So I'm not being a purist, but just saying to show you through these examples that just go in bland and think about like, this may work, just making a bet. And it's not always working. And then you end up doing extra work and then start over and then trying to study. Okay, let's step back and to ask what people actually seek in this product. Is this something we're aiming at the wrong direction? For example, if you're designing your account experience, if your assumption like going to design is that people want to be secure, like they just want to be absolutely secure, but then you just have a lot of extra steps for people to just log in. But then you find a lot of people abandon, like they don't want to sign in with your accounts. And then you're just frustrated and like, why? You see the value, but people don't see the value. And then if you do research, you find out people actually prioritize convenience over security. They are willing to sacrifice security just for convenience. They just want to, make their experience, easier and then just spend less time in this. So then, like this is what I'm aiming to. So you switch your direction based on that. So I think this is to say like research is the value is there, and you cannot just skip this step, and then you have to repeat somehow. And then beyond product development is that a lot of times, like, business may make decisions, without looking into things, and they will just say like, oh, of course, you show me this research. There's nothing that I don't know. So like this attitude usually means that they are just overconfident about what they know, and then they are always like influenced by this positivist thinking because they think like, oh, something like we're looking at the numbers, it looks good, it must work. So, and then they will just go with it. But then I think that's usually a very dangerous area because when you think about that, it's working. It's only showing us it has worked, but we don't know in the future, it will work or not. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times the companies are obsessed with, oh, let's just only study with our own customers or our own users, but they don't realize like, what they call as their own customer users, they don't own them, these people. And then people can just switch to a different company the next day. So that's to say like business needs to be more open to this kind of discovery research, discovery work, to which are looking at issues that are broader than the business itself sometimes, then you can catch up, right? So you cannot just focusing on, your own like small customer like segments and then everything works well. And then without realizing customers are exposed to other options as well. Once they find better one, they will just jump to the new opportunity. So ditching your own business, I think that's kind of why I think, research has ability to kind of predict the opportunities and to help business to align their goals, kind of future facing in this sense. These are some examples on top of my head. Yeah.
And have you been doing anything, in your role so far to kind of help, various stakeholders around you see that perspective? Anything that you've learned that works well?
Yeah, I mean, there are several general things that I learned. Normally, like, first of all, it's hard to kind of place researchers precisely, where we are in the organization. I don't think many organizations know like where to put their researchers, on the organization charts. I think this means that it is kind of a researcher's task to put ourselves on the map, I think as early as possible, because we cannot be involved much later and because it's already too late. So I think then for, UX researchers, I think it's really helpful to always find opportunities, to find partners, to find people who understand the research value, and then to be like allies, to kind of put you to the, for example, the OKR, the objectives and key results, and to put researchers on this kind of quarterly planning stage, so they know like this is the research, researchers are there in the beginning. So I think doing this not only just increase our visibility, but also help improve the entire team to function better, so that when they decide, these are the goals, these are the outcomes we want to chase, and then you have a researcher input there. So I think that's very valuable. Other ways, like you can always, in many opportunities, kind of to repeat some of the insights you find, because sometimes the research insights is not bound to a specific project. It can be used in multiple areas. And then that's why you have to come up with very appealing stories and very short, like 1 minute, I tell a story and have impact to the people who are sitting there. And, they may forget the next day, and then you just keep telling the same story. And in other meetings with the same person, maybe third time or fourth time, your story sticks and then becomes part of the decision making, and, from more talks, kind of circulating these insights. I think it's fair to say like you spend as much time socializing your research as you do the actual research. that's how you make a impact directly. And then I think that's very rewarding in a way, because I think you find out besides you, a lot of people, they do not directly interact with users, even though the user may be in their job title, but the way they do, they have assumptions. They will just follow some design principles or some sort of business principles. So their idea of users is very abstract. It's very, with some certain assumptions attached. But you are the most close to the users and the dynamic users, and you're closest to what's happening and what people are saying. So I think that's your advantage. So you should use that and then to help and to kind of advocate these ideas and these stories. And then sometimes it's also very useful to kind of show value against some quantitative data or metrics, because if your goal is to improve your product or grow your business, it doesn't matter if it's only one person who dislike it. If there's one person who dislike it from our research, there definitely have to be 100, 1,000 people just like this person experiencing this issue. So if you don't fix it because there's only one, you're basically ignoring it, and it will just hurt your product or business. So I think this idea, kind of research can always stay close to the source and then kind of help you to predict in the near future and what your product or business would look like and would working towards.
Great, thanks. So maybe to sort of wrap up, is there anything that you're working on, whatever it may be, or just something you're passionate about that you'd like to share with everybody?
Yeah, I think I'm starting to attend this conference called Epic People. So actually I've heard of it many times, many years, but this year was the first time I attended. It was really eye-opening and was really helpful, and just to see how versatile researchers are, and in so many different fields. I would encourage people who consider career transition, just take opportunity to kind of check this out. So I think it will be a good opportunity for you to learn, to understand, I've heard UX, but then a lot of people have heard, but then when you're graduate students or a PhD, so you do not necessarily understand how concretely how it works. So I think having this quick and very interactive conference really helped that. So great. I went there just after I made the transition. I just wish I had gone before that. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. And as I frequently do, I'll link to Epic. And so if anybody wanted to get in touch with you, to learn about a little bit more about your story and what you're up to, or to maybe reach out for some advice, what's a good place for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I think I can be easily reached at LinkedIn. You can just search my name and Best Buy. I think it will just show up. So I'm happy to connect with you and then to have a chat with you.
Wonderful. And I'll link to LinkedIn as well. So, Bo, thanks for coming on. I appreciate talking with you. It was good to kind of dig into, your career journey, since it was so fresh, and really hear all the details on kind of what you just went through this. So thanks for sharing all that. Thank you all for listening to the Anthro to UX podcast. To learn everything you need to break into UX, visit anthro2ux.com. There you will find all the podcast episodes and career coaching resources. Please like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.